You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-host, Kevin. Kevin, how are we doing tonight?
Doing good, man. It's Friday night, so getting ready for the Week 10 slate here. What a great Thursday night game we had. So awesome way to start off the week, and congratulations to anyone who had Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, or Lamar Jackson on your roster. So you started out great, right? Derrick Henry, a little bit less than what we've come to expect, but he did get in the end zone, so that kind of salvaged the day for him here a little bit. But yeah, if you started out with Jamar Chase, congratulations, you were on the right side of a historic effort. And if you were going up against Jamar Chase, it's time to grind.
Right. Yeah, I'm fully expecting a few questions and comments tonight coming in. How do you overcome that one? That'll be interesting. That'll be fun, and we got a fun little game kind of planned later. Game, maybe be overstating it there a little bit. We got some fun little trivia type of stuff here around Jamar Chase's performance last night as well. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So, but you're right. It is welcome into the Friday Night Fantasy Football Lights, to the Fantasy Football Huddle and the Bet Set Snap here for Week 10. So I am very excited to be here and getting to hang out with you on a Friday night and looking to talk some foosball here coming up this weekend. But anything else besides some major fantasy points stand out last night?
I mean, it was PI there on that 2-point conversion there at the end, right? And they just swallowed the whistles, but that's okay. That's the game they play. But it was what a good game, man. It's just fun to watch football like that, right? You thought Bengals kind of jumped out and managed to get that lead, and then Ravens tied up. Bengals get the lead before halftime. Ravens come back. Ravens take the lead. They're scoring on 3 straight possessions. The Bengals come roaring back. Oh, wait. The Ravens take the lead again. Oh, the Bengals are within 1, and they're going for it at the end of the game. Like, what a cool thing. I think my side note is we need to find a better we need to find a better play than the onside kick. Like, we just do. We need to find a better play than the onside kick. I don't care whether you want to call it 4th and 20, 4th and 15, like anything that's better than a 3% odd. Like let's find out how to make this interesting. Right. Because onside kicks, it's so exciting when your team gets it, but the odds aren't in your favor. Like, that you're just kind of hoping that someone does, something silly, right? They kick a ball on the receiving team by accident and it bounces right back to your guy's lap or whatever. But it's not that fun of a play. Like, you just kind of roll your eyes and go, okay, great. Now the game's over. Like, I don't know. We need to find something better. And this whole declaring the onside kick thing is bull crap.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I felt like the NFL took a not so great thing and made it worse. And we just need to find a better play for it.
Yeah, there's something to that it just kind of comes down to, and you're right. It is absolutely exciting when it happens, and when it doesn't happen, it's kind of status quo, right? And there's you sit there and you see so many teams make these kind of amazing comebacks or make these incredible drives to come down to the end of it, to then get there and just have it be like, oh, well, is what it was, game over, right? Like, the fact that when an onside kick happens, like it's a huge highlight for the week type of thing. And it outdoes some of, and at that point, it even outdoes some of these other amazing plays that we see, because people actually talk about the fact that there was an onside kick recovered, not like, I'm not saying that it needs to be something that's 50-50, but something where it's even, 30, 25, like 20 to 30% odds of something like that happening. and being able to rock and roll it, right? Like, so, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So other than that, I guess, before we get started, Nico Collins is designated to return. We think his return is probable, but it has not been announced yet. But Keon Coleman is out. Michael Pittman is out. Tyreek Hill apparently has a wrist injury, so he's now questionable for the game. I think he's going to play. They just had to put him on the injury report, but nevertheless, Tyreek Hill's there, so hey, watch out. And who else am I missing, Derek? I feel like
CMC with the been activated
McCaffrey
and
return.
yep.
And he is expected to play, according to any and all sources. So that's a good thing for those of you who were diligently holding on to McCaffrey for this long. You're going to get to see if your patience is rewarded. I would keep my Jordan Mason shares handy, at least for the next week or two, and make sure that he's no longer needed before we start dumping players, because I'm kind of waiting for this first week to see what it looks like. And if players get frustrated, they're dropping Jordan Mason, even if it's like right before the game on Sunday. I'm going to be trying to snatch him up, at least in a couple different places where I might be a little thin at running back. And, never know, create some depth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is certainly one of those that it is, it's interesting, right? Like, we're going to finally start seeing some of these guys, and we're going to seeing some of these guys return, and just in kind of the right time as you start making the push for the playoffs. I know that there's several of my best ball lineups and that I threw out there that need some CMC, big monster CMC differentiators coming down the stretch here to kind of salvage any potential returns on some of those best ball formats. So that's all right. It is what it is, and we'll see what we can make of it. So, but we do have any other thoughts here before we start diving into a couple of questions?
No, I think let's dive into it. Let's give the people what they want.
All right, awesome. And again, guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and throw them in the chat. Let's go ahead and chat about those and get that rocking and rolling here for the show here. Hunter, over on YouTube, what do you think the pick value is in Dynasty for Tyrone Tracy? Hunter, let us know if that's a super flex or a single QB type of Dynasty. But while we're kind of waiting for that too, what do you think on this one?
I think somewhere around RB 15. Right? He's a young guy, but he's playing for a team with a bad offensive line, or at least a subpar offensive line. The quarterback play is shaky at best. Like, Tracy's done a good job, and his receiving ability out of the backfield definitely helps, but Devin Singletary is still there. Like, that is still a thorn in our side. So, I mean, I think you're taking him kind of in that same area as like a Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren. He might have a little bit more upside than those guys, but I think it's in that same, kind of that same vein, right? He's the middle, middle to top end RB2 for a dynasty format, thinking he's still going to get his legs underneath him right now. But I don't know that I'd go any higher than that. Like, he has some pop, but it's just on a bad offense.
Right. And I think I probably see him maybe a touch bit lower dynasty wise than that RB 15. I probably have him closer to RB, kind of 20 to 24, kind of in that range, that very back end of that RB2 type of dealer. So just a little bit lower. But when looking at that from a dynasty and a pick perspective and all of that, like, maybe you can get a 2025 like early second for that. I don't know that you're going to get much more than that, right? Like, first, you're probably going to be having to give, a piece back for if getting Tyrone Tracy and for 2025, even late first, you're probably going to have to be giving a player back at that point. But that's kind of where I've got that one, and it doesn't really change much for me if it's a if it's a super flex or a single QB league, it's probably in that early to mid second type of range is what you can probably realistically expect. Cool. Alrighty. And again, guys, if there's any questions, comments, concerns, throw those out there. Let's go ahead and chat about that. Let's get those things rocking and rolling. One of the things that looking ahead, we do have some things as well to be aware of for folks setting the lineups. If you tend to wait till Sunday morning to schedule your roster there and take a look at that, I certainly hope you don't have too many Giants or too many Panthers on your roster, but for folks out there managing Chuba Hubbard or Malik Neighbors, keep in mind that game kicks off at 7:30 in the morning, 9:30 in the morning Eastern time there. So they got that early Germany game. So be aware of that. Keep that in mind as you're setting lineups, and maybe look at that Saturday night at least before going to bed instead of Sunday morning. So definitely worth keeping an eye on there. Any kind of matchups over the weekend that are really kind of standing out to you this week that, fantasy gold or just really good, you're watching?
I think fantasy wise, I think there's a couple. I think the Monday night game between the Rams and Dolphins has the potential to be pretty fun. Some big time receiving options there. Both teams led by a good running back, right, between Achan and Kyron Williams. They have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. So a lot of big name fantasy value coming in on Monday night. So I think that is definitely something to be tuning in for. I think the Sunday night game holds a lot of appeal just because, watching the Lions is fun right now.
Right.
So everyone kind of tabbed Houston as their AFC darling coming into the season. They're going through some growing pains, right? They're learning how to keep winning. The game against the Jets was definitely a setback for them, but here we go. We're gonna do this thing again. Diggs going down didn't help many, but if you get Nico back, then you're okay, right? So Joe Mixon's been on fire. And then for the Lions standpoint, Gibbs, Montgomery, St. Brown. I think J-Mo's coming back from his suspension this week, right? So he should be active for the game. And then you also have Sam Laporta. So I think both of those are good matchups for the fantasy football side of things. The one I'm selfishly interested in is I want to see how the Broncos respond against the Kansas City Chiefs. They got beat up a little bit last week in Baltimore. Semi-embarrassed. Maybe not entirely, but semi-embarrassed. Traditionally, over the last few years, the Chiefs have had the Broncos number, but the Broncos have played the Chiefs pretty well in a lot of those games, especially over the last 2 years. So I'm interested to see what they learned and how they're going to try and hang the first loss of the season on Kansas City, because someone's always got to be the first, right? So why not Denver in a divisional matchup? They know each other very well. Let's see if they can go on the Arrowhead and steal one.
Yeah, that one there does hold a lot of intrigue because those two teams do play each other incredibly tight, and Denver certainly has put up a fight, and had some closer games than expected over the last few seasons, and finally, breaking that curse, kind of, so to speak, last season. By finally beating Mahomes and the Chiefs there. So that'll be an interesting one there as well. A couple of questions coming in here. Stacks over on YouTube asking, start the Buffalo Bills defense special teams or Detroit Lions defense special teams this week?
I'm going Buffalo. Going up against Indianapolis. Indy did not look very good the other week against the Vikings, and I think Buffalo can do some similar things on the defensive side of the ball. No Michael Pittman, as I said earlier. So you have Downs, who's presumably going to be the main receiver here for Joe Flacco and company. But the biggest trick is going to be, can you contain Jonathan Taylor? And if Buffalo can do that, I think they'll be able to kind of key in on Flacco, who's not a mobile quarterback, and create some sacks and disrupt him a little bit in the backfield.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Detroit has just been playing good on the defensive side for defense special teams. And seemingly it hasn't really mattered much on who they've played. They've put up some pretty good performances there. But I think I'm right there with you. I think it would lean on the Buffalo Bills side of things as well, right? Like, really thought that we would see a much better performance out of Flacco this past week. Like, that was one of those that it was okay, cool. We're gonna bench Richardson, make the move to Flacco because that gives us the best chance to win, right? As the coach speak and all the the commentary and the reports coming out of Indianapolis, and then Joe Flacco takes the field and it doesn't really change or doesn't really seem to move the dial there. And that offense just didn't look like they had anything going either there. So Joe
I think
Flacco
it would have been worse still with Richardson.
very well could have been.
Like, as much as Flacco didn't really have it going, maybe Richardson stays alive because he moves around a little bit and he's not getting quite disrupted. But I mean, Richardson's not accurate with the football. So you take the sacks, maybe you take 1 or 2 sacks away, but now you're adding in a possible interception and, some things like that. I mean, I don't know that it fares any better for the Colts. It just looks a little different.
Right.
At least
It was,
last week.
yeah, fair enough. Flacco certainly looked like a QB that, a 39-year-old quarterback back there playing QB. So who knows? Maybe we'll see some different scheming and a different game plan coming in here to, potentially try and make some different outcomes there. But really good question. Leadership over on YouTube asking thoughts on Washington and Pittsburgh. I'm assuming that means the Washington and Pittsburgh matchup for this week. Thoughts on this one?
I think this is a very good spot for Jaden Daniels, right? Like, he's coming out. He's playing like the best rookie quarterback in the class here, at least season to date. Washington is far surpassing expectations, so they're starting to believe in themselves here a little bit. So I think Pittsburgh presents an interesting challenge because it's probably the best defense. I don't even know if I need to say probably that Washington's faced all year long. So how reliant on his legs is Jaden Daniels going to be when he's getting chased around by TJ Watt and company? So I think that could be a little bit interesting. We know Brian Robinson Jr. is not going to play in this game. That's a name that I forgot earlier. So a lot more Austin Eckler, which maybe in this kind of game, it probably helps a little bit because those screen passes and those quick dump offs, it makes those defensive ends slow down just a little bit. So that way it doesn't go right over the, right past them or right over the top of them. But that Steelers linebacking core is really quick side to side too. So I think that'll be interesting. I think it'll be interesting, Russ seeing if he continues to cook, what George Pickens can get done against this Washington defense, who is probably surpassing some expectations here at the moment, right? They're giving up some yards, but they're not giving up a ton of points necessarily. So that'll be a little interesting. And does Pittsburgh continue to lean heavily on Najee, even though Jalen Warren should be back in the fold this week? So there's definitely a couple questions here that I want answered, but I think it'll be an entertaining game.
I think you're right. I think it will be fun to watch. It'll also be interesting too, right? Like you mentioned the Washington defense side of things there, and Marshawn Lattimore will be suiting up here for the Commanders as well, and so that could add a little bit of extra wrinkle onto that defense. That could potentially add a kind of another playmaker out there on the outside against some of those wide receivers, and so it could be very interesting. And right, it'll be interesting too to see kind of that matchup between him and Pickens and how that may kind of play out there as well this week. So that's kind of a fun little matchup within the matchup type of thing to potentially keep an eye on. So Alrighty. And then Joe over on YouTube, Taysom or Ferguson, half point PPR. They have a nice lead with Jamar going off last night. I'm sure you probably have more than a nice lead in that one if you started Jamar.
No doubt. I'm going Ferguson in this one. I'm not going to try and get too cute about it, honestly, Joe. Taysom, obviously, you kind of have the upside of the quarterback at times, but they really haven't put him in those situations this year. He's been more uh, kind of a tight end strictly. It is interesting for Taysom this week. I'll give you that with Chris Olave being ruled out. So I do think that it does present an interesting opportunity as far as catching some footballs for Taysom Hill, but I really think that the Saints are just going to ride the ever loving hell out of Alvin Kamara. It really kind of starts and stops with him. And we're just going to kind of see how this Atlanta game goes, right? Because if Atlanta comes out and hits a couple big plays, since they don't have Lattimore anymore, right? And they're just kind of dinking and dunking around it, or whether they hit the deep shots to Mooney, they could put this one out of hand rather quickly and then just salt it away on the ground, and you're not going to get much offensively out of the Saints. So I think I'm leaning Ferguson, even with Cooper Rush being the quarterback. Backup quarterbacks tend to really like tight ends as well as the unknown receiver that they play with on the practice squad all the time. And Ferguson's already number 2 in targets on that team. I think that continues. So I'd take the easy points with Ferguson, with having Jamar go off for your team, Joe, and just kind of punt, if you will, on that position. Go the safe route, and then if you want to take a gamble somewhere else, go for it.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see what transpires with the Saints, right? Like, we've seen this go kind of one of two ways, right? When they coach is no longer coaching and they make a coaching change mid-season, sometimes you see a very reinvigorated, fired up, ready to go team that just goes out there and really brings the heat on a week. Or it goes the opposite, where they realize that they really don't have anything to play with anymore or play for anymore. They're coming off a loss to the Panthers. Like, their downfield threats are not going to be playing this game, with both Shaheed on IR, Olave's out for this game, right? Like, this offense gets much more one-dimensional type of thing at that point. And I do like that thought that Atlanta could just jump up early on this one, and and this could turn into a very ugly football game to watch. So I would also lean on the Jake Ferguson route side of things there as well. But
has there been a bigger fall from grace in the NFL this year than how the Saints started out those first couple weeks and what we thought that team was going to be offensively, to Olave continuously getting dinged up now? This is what, the 3rd game he's missed?
I believe this is the 2nd this season.
2nd.
But it's also the 2nd concussion this year.
Okay, yes. Because he got knocked out early last week.
Right. So it was basically you got one target, one catch kind of thing, and that was game over.
I mean, Derek Carr missed, Olave's been out, Taysom Hill's been out for the first part of the season. Shaheed goes on IR. Now they're trading away Lattimore. Like, this team started out really hot, right? And everyone's kind of talking about, like, holy smokes, like, what's going on here? And then they tend to fall back a little bit, but I don't think we expected the fall of losing 7 consecutive football games.
Right. Capped off with the loss to very, I don't even know if it's that arguable that, worst team in the league. Right. Like, the Panthers.
Right.
Although the Panthers could make an argument that they're not the worst team in the league, because they've got a couple of wins and they're not the only 2-win team out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could argue it might be the Jaguars again.
Right.
Like, they have not been playing well.
Right. I mean, that's, it'll be interesting to see how that one comes to play. And, I'm really kind of interested to see how this, this race to the first round, first overall pick, how that kind of looks and works there. Right. Like, the Jags 2-7, Browns 2-7, Raiders 2-7, Patriots 2-7, the Giants 2-7, Panthers and Saints both 2-7. So Yikes.
A lot of
Yikes.
bad football.
Yes. So, which is interesting, right? Like typically we see a lot more parity out there and we see a lot more teams riding closer to, 500 than, and maybe 2-3 teams down there that's battling it out. A couple of teams way at the top, but everybody else is typically sandwiched within about 2 or 3 wins of each other, and not really the case anymore. So, Joe over on YouTube saying, thanks for the advice. Also, should I flick Najee or Drake London?
I'm going London.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take the gamble that even if Atlanta jumps out early, London's getting a good chunk of that. I like the fact that it's a half-point PPR. Najee's not really receiving the ball, especially if Warren's going to be re-engaged into the offense after being out with an injury. So I think you're going to lose a little bit of production on Najee possibly. So yeah, I'm gonna go with London there. I'll take the 3 points on 6 catches, and then off those 6 catches, see if you can get 75 yards, maybe a touchdown. Call it good.
Yeah, I think that'll be a pretty good stat line there. And you're right. If Drake London's playing, I'm playing him over Najee. Like just pure and simple. I'm not going to overthink that one. So great question, Joe. Yeah, and again, guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, throw those in the chat. Let's go ahead and chat about those and get those things rocking and rolling for the for your lineups there and all of that good stuff. But while we're I did come across some interesting kind of things when I was looking through some stuff earlier today. So Jamar Chase's performance last night was epic, right? And everybody that played him, very happy if you have him on your roster, very much looking as oh my gosh, what do I do to try and counter this if you're playing against him, right? But as good as that performance was, it was not the greatest performance in fantasy that we've seen out of the wide receiver position since 2000, right? So going back to 2000, Jamar Chase's performance last night ranked 4th overall. And interestingly enough, it was 4th overall, regardless of scoring format, half point PPR, full point PPR, or standard scoring, which was even more crazy for me to kind of see how that one came to play. But out of the top 10 performances for the wide receiver position, Jamar Chase's game last night ranked 4th. Can you name any of the other 10 top 10 performances out there? And I base this all off of half point PPR scoring. So you get a point for the name, 2 points if you can name the game that it happened with, or we'll do it a point for the name of the player, 2 points if you can name the year, 3 points if you can name the point total on that. All of those being half point PPR. And folks in the chat, play along as well. Like if you guys, yep, it's fun. And some of these names, right? Like some of them are like, oh yeah, nope, I get that. I even remember that one. Okay, yep. Some of these names you're like, who? So there is going to be some of those, but there are some pretty good ones and certainly some very memorable results in there. So any thoughts about any of the other names that might show up?
Cooper Kupp. I'm going to say from the 2019 season that he just went bonkers.
Interestingly enough, no Cooper Kupp in the top 10.
Really? I would have sworn that one of those 14 reception games would have got him up there. Okay, no Cooper Kupp. All right, strikeout number 1. Man. Jefferson? Jefferson's got to be up there.
No, Jefferson's not.
Oh my gosh. I think Jamar Chase is probably on there at least once, if not twice more.
Number 3. He's got the 3rd and the 4th. Joe had a thought here as well, saying, I remember having a huge lead on a Monday night game and Wes Welker had a 200-yard game. Let's check. And Wes Welker is not in the top 10 there. So we
What
have
the hell?
Jamar.
Tyreek.
That would be number 2 on the list. By the way,
CeeDee Lamb.
No CD in there. Interestingly enough.
I would have sworn one of those games he had last year would have been in the top 10.
Yeah, no, he did not make it there.
Wow. I feel like AJ Brown might have a game in the top 10. He's always good for the big explosive play.
AJ Brown is not on the
Oh
list.
my gosh. This is
So,
way tougher.
yeah, this one's a little rough. I like Joe here. Saying, how about Julio Jones? Julio, I remember Julio had
Panthers.
had some
It was
monster
against the Panthers.
had some monster performances there. And no, interestingly enough, Julio did not make this list that I found.
Oh, this game is rigged. This game's rigged. Since 2000.
So I will I'll
Randy Moss.
No, interestingly enough, you would have thought that Randy would have been up there as well. All right, so here's some hints about some guys doing it.
God.
Right? Some potential hints. Right, so Tyreek number 2, Jamar Chase number 3, Jamar Chase number 4 on that. But I like that. Calvin Johnson must be as there as well. No, interestingly enough, he is not on there. Alrighty, so looking at it, I'll give some hints out there. The lowest point performance in this half point PPR scoring was 45.4 points for that. Both of those happened in 2013. The highest point total was 54.6 in this, and that one happened in 2000. Everything else is in between that 54.6 and that 45.4 point total out there. Alrighty. So, yeah, and let's see here. So, name Tyreek and Jamar. Both of those guys are active players. Really only 1, 2, maybe 2 more. Potentially 3. The third guy definitely goes by a different name now than or no, I guess not. Nope. Ochocinco is not. All right, here we go. We'll start from the bottom and work our way up. There's a tie for number 10 between Andre Johnson and Eric Decker, both of which had the 45.4 points out there. And real quick before we get going, Binkin saying, my guys, what's up? Not much, Binkin. We are doing a little bit of trivia type of things here, going through and seeing what other players ranked where Jamar Chase's epic performance last night kind of played into it. So Joe Kingley saying to over on YouTube, saying to remind him to rescind his application for Jeopardy. They're not very good at this. Yeah. I get, I'm asking the questions. I'll be right there with you guys too, that if I didn't have the answers, I'd probably be right there. So, alrighty. Let's go ahead and move up to kind of finish that one. Okay. So Andre Johnson, number 10, 2013 against the Colts, had 9 receptions, 229 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. Eric Decker, 2013 against the Chiefs, 45.4 points, 8 receptions, 174 yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns.
Demarius on here?
No, that was another one that I would have thought would have been there off of that big game. But number 9, Tyler Lockett, one of the active guys out there in 2020 against the Cardinals, had 45.5 points, 15 receptions, 200 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. Number 8 was Kevin Curtis, 2007 against the Lions, 45.6, 11 receptions, 222 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns.
Never would have guessed that.
Yeah, no, I was like, that one took me back and couldn't remember it. So, Amari Cooper, 2023 against the Texans. So just last year, had the 46 points, 11 receptions, 265 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Binkin's asking about Priest Holmes on that one. It's a good guess. They are all wide receivers on this. This is where does his performance last night rank among the top 10 wide receiver fantasy points in the half point PPR scoring since 2000? Will Fuller. That was another guy that had an epic performance against the Falcons in 2019. 14 receptions, 217 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. Here's one that would have never guessed myself either. Drew Bennett. We all remember Drew Bennett from back in the day, I'm sure. But Drew Bennett in 2004 against the Chiefs, 47.3 points, 12 receptions, 233 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns.
See with the Titans?
I'd have to look that one up. They said the name didn't even stand out to me on that one. I'm trying to look that up now.
I'm looking. I got you.
Okay. And then number 4 was Jamar Chase's performance last night. Binkin saying, what was that Rams wide receiver Bruce? I think you're thinking of Isaac Bruce. But he also did not make the list here. So you had Jamar Chase's performance last night at number 14 or number 4 overall. Jamar Chase's performance in 2022 against the Chiefs put up 50.1 points with 11 receptions, 266 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. And number 2 was Tyreek in 2020 against the Bucks, 51.4 points, 13 receptions, 269 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. And number 1, this one I would have not guessed either, but it was Jimmy Smith, 2000 versus the Ravens, 54.6 uncorked for 15 receptions, 291 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. So that was the wide receivers out there that and where Jamar Chase's performance last night kind of ranked up against the top 10 since 2000. Binkin asking about Randy Moss, and another good guess, but he did not make the top 10 with those with any of those. So it's an interesting list there to say, for sure.
Even Google can't find Drew Bennett.
Oh, that's funny.
Like there's not even a Wikipedia page for this guy.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's like I said, had I
Wow.
let's see here. So yeah, Drew Bennett looks like that was probably played with the Titans and the
Okay,
Rams.
it was the Titans. Okay, so
And
there you go.
Yep, and in 2004 it would have been the Titans. From what
look at me. I can't find anything on the guy, but at least I knew what team he played for.
There you go. Absolutely. So, one of those when you have a career day and you get to etch your name on some history there. So
Oh yeah, sitting on everybody's bench.
Yeah. Probably.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy to think of some of the names that aren't on there.
Right. And to think of the names that are on there too, right? Like there's
Evan Curtis and Drew Bennett.
Right.
There's Will Fuller. Like I think I remember that game
Mm-hmm.
because he hit Deshaun hit him on 3 deep shots.
Right.
For those touchdowns. Like it wasn't necessarily that he broke loose. Like he just straight burned the defense. He was right after he came back from a concussion or a hamstring injury or something like that. And Deshaun just went to him over and over and over again.
Right. So yeah, and that was one of those two that not a lot of people were starting Fuller in that matchup either. Binkin saying that they were sitting on waivers, LOL. Yeah, probably. So that's interesting to think about too, that was 20 years ago.
Getting old.
Yep. And Binkin, I do see your question up there. We're going to come back to that here in just 1 second. Arturo saying that he traded Chase for a CD a few weeks ago because they told me his schedule was bad, and I'm sad right now. Yeah,
yeah, that one's gonna sting a little bit.
Yeah,
for all the reasons.
Yes.
For all the reasons. That one's going to sting a little.
Right, with the Dak side of things, not looking great there. CD a little bit banged up. Chase having the blow up. The crystal ball must have been broken on that one. Got to take that into the shop this week, I think.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Arturo, I feel for it on that one. But then he traded CD for Garrett.
It's not bad. I get why you did that.
Yeah, I can see that. Right, Garrett Wilson is certainly creeping up the in receptions there. So especially if you're playing a full point PPR, I can see it.
Heck yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And Binkin saying that they're all over DFS and Fantasy Industry Streets Network, etc. And you guys got some sharp minds. Should look to expand the brand.
Well, I appreciate that.
Right. Binkin, we're open to ideas. If you got an idea for us on things like that, shoot it over to us and we can see if that's something that might be up our alley. But appreciate the
time might be the biggest problem at this point, because between Alex and I and our crazy work schedules this year, and Derek having to run more solo shows this year than in the previous five
put together. Yeah.
So like this year's been nuts for the show. Like it's been good in so many ways, but our personal schedules and professional schedules to try and coordinate this sometimes has just been bonkers.
Yeah, this week has been very interesting. By the way, on that note, keep eyes posted. We'll keep it. We'll keep updates coming through on that one. But there is a very good chance that the Tuesday show is probably not going to happen on Tuesday. May get moved to a different day of the week, and we're still working on some logistics and still working on some scheduling things there. So keep the eyes peeled on that one. We'll post some things on YouTube here as well as some of the other socials, letting know of when the next week, what the show that typically happens on Tuesday, when that'll ultimately end up being. So, but the good news is, Kevin,
life being crazy.
Yes, that was
work schedules and everything else.
You brought that up, and I said before we forget to mention that, let's make sure we mention that and let people know. The good news is you and I will be back Friday night, for the normal side of things. So that Tuesday show, that one's going to be a little bit of, we're going to play around and see what we can work out schedule wise to get folks the information for that one. So, all righty. Binkin over on YouTube, Jaylen Warren or Rashawn Johnson this week?
If Jalen's playing, I'm going to take my gamble on him and go with the catches. So if you're at a half point or full point PPR setting, I'm going to gamble on Jaylen Warren over Rashawn. It seems like DeAndre's kind of held him off pretty well, right? Like we questioned it earlier on in the year. There was a lot of rumblings that Rashawn might just take over because they're frustrated with DeAndre. And all of a sudden, DeAndre kind of maybe not blows up, but has 2 back-to-back really good weeks, and kind of put Rashawn Johnson in his taillights and really hadn't looked back since. So at this point, I'm going to tell you Jaylen Warren, just to see if he gets those check downs and you can get those, quote unquote cheap points out of that running back position and see how it shakes out for you. But neither option I feel like is going to be entirely fruitful this week.
Yeah, I mean, both of those things are going to be kind of a meh kind of thing there, right? Like,
that's injuries and bye weeks for you.
Yep, exactly, right. And it's not that the Steelers have an easy matchup there. At least certainly not the easy matchup we thought that the Commanders defense would be earlier in the season, right? They're very middle of the pack when it comes to allowing points to opposing fantasy running backs there. But I would still, even with that being the case, I would still lean the Jaylen Warren side of things. Rashawn Johnson, and this is held true all season long. If Rashawn Johnson falls in the end zone, you can, you'll be happy that you played out of a flex type of consideration, but touchdown dependent running back, and I don't know that I want that. I'd rather take my shot on Jaylen Warren and his 30 to 35% snap share. So, Mario over on YouTube saying, good evening. Welcome in. welcome in. So again, guys, if there's any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, let's get those rocking and rolling here for the fantasy football huddle and get things ready, set to go here on that one. So looking at that as well, right? Any other kind of thoughts stand out here as far as potential big blow up weeks, or this is one of those two that's if I know that you probably have a couple of lineups where you played Jamar Chase, and now you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, what do I do to try and combat that? Because it's really tough when you have a guy blow up for 40 plus points and really take care of an entire positional grouping by himself.
Yeah.
For
So
fantasy.
I played Jamar Chase across four different leagues last night. In 3 of the 4, I had either Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson to help combat it a little bit. And in 2 of the 4, I had Chase Brown. Again, not the same, but it does help combat it a little bit, because at this point it's eating an elephant, right? You got to do it one bite at a time. You can't expect anything to quite match what Jamar Chase did. However, I think there are some potential options out there, right? At least as far as headliner fantasy guys. I think that Tyreek Hill could be a guy who finally cuts loose this week, Monday night against the Rams. I could see that being a high scoring affair. I think that's a possibility of a guy who could cut loose and really help jump in and eat some of that up. I want to be able to say AJ Brown, but I don't think this is necessarily an AJ Brown week, because quite frankly, it's Saquon Barkley. And how bad that Cowboys run defense is right now, Saquon Barkley could take a big chunk out of the Jamar Chase point total, if you are fortunate enough to have him on your roster. Another guy who I think is at least interesting this week is Tank Dell.
Mm-hmm.
Even whether Nico comes back or not, I think Tank Dell is interesting. Because if Nico doesn't come back, he's going to get peppered with a crap ton of targets, because he's really the only guy that CJ Stroud is kind of trusting as far as the wide receiver group goes. And if Nico does come back, now Tank Dell's facing second coverage instead of primary coverage, and it helps make his life a little easier. So I think that could be an interesting way to eat up some points. Josh Downs with no Michael Pittman, assuming that they're going to be trailing to the Bills for most of the game. I think he could provide some big play upside for some bonus points. So I don't think all is lost, Derek. It's definitely going to be an uphill battle. And you're going to need really strong efforts by multiple players, right? The fact of the matter is, he just scored the 4th most points since 2000 for a wide receiver. So it's not like this is something that you can come out and get every single week, right? So it is going to be having the right guys put up above, even well above average numbers to kind of combat this. So it's going to be a kind of a chop and wood thing. Like, you just got to keep grinding. It's going to take a combination of position groups to be able to combat the Jamar Chase this week.
Right. And this is one of those that it almost reminds me of, kind of reminds me of that Alvin Kamara performance a few years back, right? When he had 12 touchdowns, or not 12, 6 touchdowns on that Christmas Eve.
And the green shoes that he got fined for, the green and red Christmas shoes that he got fined for. What a day he had. And they stopped him and they pulled him that last drive instead of going for the NFL or the tie of the NFL record. I remember that. I was frustrated about that.
Yes, you and me both. But that being said, right, like, that was one of those that people got done with a watching a historic type of performance out there going, oh my gosh, how do we overcome some of that to it? And sure enough, they there was performances later that week that counteracted that to the point where guys that had Alvin Kamara playing on Thursday night ended up taking losses in that one. So it certainly can be done. And one of the things that, right, like you gave some really good names there on that one, but it is one of those that if you've got a guy that's going to be more of a floor play or a ceiling type of play, you're going to have to push the envelope there a little bit and play the guy with the ceiling play to try and overcome that a little bit, far more so than going with the guy with the high safe floor in that point. So.
Yep, absolutely. You're going for home runs, right? You're going for your speed guys. This is the week if you have Xavier Worthy and you haven't been playing him, you're playing Xavier Worthy, right? Just a couple big plays, seeing if you can turn the tide for yourself a little bit. I like Darnell Mooney as kind of that secondary wide receiver with big play upside to be able to help out with you this week. I think that one's pretty interesting as far as being able to help out there. Who else do we like here, Derek? Jordan Addison, right? Another secondary wide receiver. I'm sure everyone's going to be thinking Jamar, but Jordan Addison is another guy who maybe that's not such a bad option, right? Like being able to plug him into your flex with a little bit more of a ceiling play with how bad the Jags defense have been. And then another one who's probably further down the list, Juwan Jennings.
Right. That was the name that was sticking in my brain.
Like, I think Juwan Jennings could have a really big week against Tampa Bay. Coming off a bye week, maybe they're scheming some things for him, going to give Tampa Bay some wrinkles that they haven't seen since they got to self-scout. You got McCaffrey back, so that's taking pressure away. Like, I think there's a lot of good momentum that if you're looking for a ceiling play, Juwan Jennings might be that guy that you can plug into your flex because you need a Herculean effort and see if he can help get you there.
Right. Yeah, I like that call. I like that call a lot. Alrighty.
JMO might be another one coming back from suspension against Houston. Their secondary has been a little suspect, right? So you could find these guys, right? Like these guys aren't necessarily just wide receiver ones. You can find these guys, but this is the week you play them, right? You're not going, you're not playing Calvin Ridley this week if you have Juwan Jennings. You want to play Juwan Jennings over Calvin Ridley if you're trying to combat Jamar Chase. Because Calvin is not going to be able to do that against the Chargers. Like that's just, I don't see that being in the cards. I could be mistaken, but I don't see it happening.
Right. Yeah, it certainly could be but yeah, home run is where you got to play at that one. Joe over on YouTube asking, have you heard anything about Washington kicker Seibert? Heard he's hurt. So interestingly enough, go Boomer Sooner there. You mean Austin Seibert, the number one overall point scorer in Big 12 football history? That Austin Seibert?
My gosh. You know why he's the number one point scorer? Because they could never get it in the end zone.
Or they put it in the end zone a whole bunch and got there off of extra points.
One at a time.
Yep. Keep in mind he was the kicker through some of those really, really good Oklahoma offenses.
Oh yeah, and he got the COVID year too, right? So I mean, so he did play that extra season. So he didn't practice Wednesday. He was limited Thursday and Friday. So they're not calling him a game time decision, but essentially you need to keep an eye on it, especially tomorrow, Joe. If he's still questionable tomorrow, I'm pivoting. I'm going to look for a different option. Like that's the good thing about kickers is they're fairly well a dime a dozen. Like there's no sense in flirting with an injury when it comes to kickers. Just swap them out, grab the next guy on your list and hope for the best. Look for warmer weather, look for domes. Preferably the home kicker always seems to do a little bit better than the road kicker. If you're looking at, the trends on it. So a couple different things to kind of look for a little bit of an advantage. But if he's still questionable tomorrow and they're saying he's going to be a game time decision, Joe, I wouldn't be messing with it. I'd be picking up another kicker like right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Interestingly enough, though, you had me thinking back on that one. So out of the 499 total points that Seibert scored in his collegiate career, 310 of those came off of extra points. 63.
A lot of extra points.
Yes, it was. So the only
A
63.
lot of touchdowns.
Yep, 63 field goals made through his collegiate career. So what is that? 2/3 basically coming off of extra points of those of that historical point deal. So anyway, fun fact for the night. Mario over on YouTube must say prior to last night's game had no clue who Tylan Wallace is. He got more targets than Zay Flowers. Is Wallace worth a pickup? Not in my opinion. No. This is
I don't even know how he got in the game. Honestly, he got in the game because Deontay Johnson doesn't know the entire playbook yet.
right.
But
And
no,
it looked like
bring
it
it
last
over.
night.
Right, just bring it over Deontay. You still have Bateman, you have Flowers, like now apparently you have Wallace, you have both tight ends. Like there's just not enough to go around for the Ravens in predictable fashion. So no, I would not be adding Tylan Wallace. I would leave him on the waiver wire and look at a different option.
Right. And Tylan Wallace, we've seen a couple of, decent games from him in the past, but it is always like one a year type of thing, right? Like outside of last night, Tylan Wallace had seen 2 targets all year. 2 targets, 2 receptions for 31 yards in the 9 games previous to last night. So this was very much an anomaly more than it was the exception there. So no, this is not a guy that I'd be looking to try and pick up there. And a guy that will likely be when he's in there, he's probably the 4th or 5th read on any given play. Like this isn't one that he's ever going to be the first read on a play that he's in there on.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be broken coverage.
Right. Mr. Wumbo, if you're down 60 points versus Chase, maybe Taysom Hill gives you a bunch of dumb stats and he might be on the waivers. Yeah,
It's possible, right? If you're chasing Jamar Chase, I don't have a problem with that, right? Taysom Hill, because of what his skill set is absolutely a ceiling play. So I don't have a problem with that. If he only gets you 2 points, you were probably going to lose that game anyway. But if he comes out from the tight end position and manages to get you 25, well, hell, I was only counting.
right. Yeah, certainly worthwhile to make that call there. That could be another ceiling play.
Yeah.
Alrighty, Abreu over on YouTube. Full point PPR flex Dell or Mooney. Also rest of season Deontay Johnson or Jamison Williams. Thanks.
Rest of season JMO for me. This week Dell or Mooney. Man, I like them both as a flex play. I am going to tell you Tank Dell because I think the Houston Texans will be playing from a negative game script and will be throwing the ball more often than the Atlanta Falcons will be. Is why I'm leaning Dell. Now, year to date and consistency rankings, I'd tell you Mooney, and no doubt. But for this week, I really do like the matchup for Dell either way. And like I said, I think the Texans are going to be trailing in this game, so he's probably going to get force-fed the ball or see a very good number of targets either way.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that Dell is the play this week. And this very well could be part of it due to the fact that not going to surprise me if we see Atlanta jump up and just kind of salt that game away. But I think you're right. I think Tank Dell does, they're playing from behind and you could very well see enough garbage time points that it outdoes just garbage time may outdo what Darnell Mooney's able to do there. So right there with you that I'm liking Dell more than Mooney this week, but I do like both of them this week. Rest of the season, I'm going with Deontay Johnson. Jamison Williams over Deontay Johnson. This is one of those that Deontay Johnson, I think, is going to be potentially the 3rd target on this offense. Maybe he works his way up into the second before the end of the season. But Jamison Williams has certainly kind of carved out a pretty good role with the Lions there. And I expect to see him continue that returning here. So
yeah, I like the Deontay move for football, right?
Right.
Like, it does make
not for fantasy.
yes, yeah, it makes the Ravens a little bit more dynamic. You have to worry about it, but for fantasy, again, the Ravens are kind of hyper targeted in, right? Like you have Flowers, you have Mark Andrews, who's been coming along here the last few weeks and been looking a lot better. And then it's kind of sporadic. You get Bateman, maybe. Then you had Wallace last night. What the hell, right? Now you're going to have Deontay involved in some of that. And oh, by the way, Isaiah Likely, once he gets healthy, is going to be back in the fold. So, don't make Baltimore more complex than what it is. It is a high scoring offense. It is a prolific offense even, but it is very streamlined. It is Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, and Mark Andrews. Like that's really it. And outside of those options, I'm really not looking at anything that Baltimore has to offer right now.
Right. I would agree with that. Mario saying thank you for the discussion back there on that Tylan Wallace combo. Mr. Wumbo saying that over on YouTube saying that Flowers goes from 5 to 20 points week to week due to the Ravens not really needing to do much except handing it off to Henry. So only be starting Wallace in like 16 team leagues with 10 bench spots. That's probably about the spot where you might have him rostered. And even then, I think that's a stretch.
Yeah. I mean, you might have him rostered, but he might be on a taxi squad at that point. Like, I don't, if anybody had him in their starting lineup, please send me a screenshot of it. Because unless I see the screenshot and you tell me you had him in, I'm going to call you a liar. There's no way you picked that one.
Right. Yeah, you managed to pick the Matt Flynn game.
Right.
Too bad Alex isn't here. That's always fun to see his reaction to the Matt Flynn.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Wumbo, say over on YouTube saying it has to luck out over Flowers plus Johnson plus Bateman plus Likely plus Andrews plus Henry / Hill dump off, and he's like 8th on the list. Yeah, you're not wrong on that one.
Spot on.
And so Mario over on YouTube saying Deontay Johnson had 1 target and he looked like a rookie. No bueno.
First game with the team. He just got over. He's learning Todd Monken's offense. He's trying to get chemistry with Lamar Jackson. He'll come around, and I think he'll come around in a big way because it's crazy how much more effort you get out of players and how their attitudes change when they go from a last place team to a first place team, and they feel like they're actually playing for something this late in the season. So give him a little bit of time. Don't reactionary drop him because you're frustrated and then go pick up someone like a Marvin Mims from Denver. Like, don't do that. Like, just give him another week or two. He'll come around.
Yeah, I would agree with that, right? Like, this is one of those that even going into that game last night, like the Ravens very much set the stage out there and tried to manage expectations that, he's only going to be in there on 10, 15 plays. Like, he's still learning the playbook, still coming along in this offense, all of that. And, keep in mind that this is the 3rd offense that he's learning in the last year, right? Like, went from the Steelers offense to Carolina's offense to the Ravens offense. And realistically, between those 3 offenses there's certainly some similarities, things like that, but those are not offenses that when you think of, how the player personnels and the groupings and everything else work, that like, oh yeah, this is they run very similar schemes to it. So there's certainly a learning curve there. And yes, it's football. And when you start looking at, even if they're running similar schemes there, a lot of times it's almost like learning a brand new language on how things are called and how things look and work in that thing. And even though the same, from one offense to the next, even if the same play may have completely different calls and signs for it, to the point where you've got to learn all of that as well. So, Yeah, I think you're right. I think give him another week or two and we'll start seeing that come around there, and we'll start seeing that chemistry be built out there. And would not surprise me if we see Deontay Johnson have a pretty solid week come like week 14, week 13, 14, 15, kind of in that range. So would not surprise me at all. Mr. Wumbo over on YouTube, there's a 5,000% higher chance someone's starting Tillman on his first breakout game over Wallace, and he was owned in 0% of leagues. Yep.
You're probably not wrong there.
No, probably not. So, Mr. Wumbo doing the in-depth research there. I like it. So, all righty. Well, guys, again, if there's any questions, thoughts, throw them out there. Let's go ahead and keep hitting these things up. I like this one. Mr. Wumbo, Randy Moss would just run his own routes, but Johnson is no Moss.
Yes.
You mean there's not many guys out there that are 6'5", 240 that can run a 4.2 and have hands like that?
Right.
So, but yeah, no, that's certainly a good thought there. Any other thoughts here, kind of coming down to it, and things that you're maybe looking at this weekend or excited to kind of see how some of those things might play out?
I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of intriguing matchups. I think San Francisco, Tampa Bay is intriguing. Like, I wish Tampa Bay had a little bit more of their offensive skill set in place to make this probably more of the game that it deserves to be. But we'll see. What's the other one? Really, same thing with New Orleans and Atlanta. Like, I wish New Orleans was at full strength, because this is a really good rivalry that people probably don't pay as much attention to for whatever reason. But yeah, other than that, like, I'm not blown away. Like, woohoo! Like, the Cowboys game against Philly doesn't have any luster to it now that Dak's hurt, and the Cowboys have been playing like trash this season. Tennessee and the Chargers bet the under on that game, right? Like, I don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored in that one. But yeah, there's just enough teams and kind of the right mix of teams on buys this week that it's not overly exciting outside the top few games.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So that's all right. We'll get through week 10 here and be on to week 11. So, Mr. Wumbo commenting in here on how the Patriots got him at the end is mind blowing, going back to the Randy Moss. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, go back and watch some of the
Brady effect,
right? Also go back and look at some of the interviews and some of Randy Moss's conversations about how that kind of came to be and what that looked like there. So, Mr. Wumble saying that they're excited to see if Hopkins can do it again this week. That is going to be a very interesting matchup, because I think we're going to see a whole lot of Pat Surtain and DeAndre Hopkins against each other there.
Yes. Like, for fantasy purposes, yeah, I'm hoping so. There's a couple matchups where I'm definitely playing Hopkins. For my own selfish reasons of being a Broncos fan, I hope not. Like, hold him in check for one more week before he goes gangbusters, please. And I think they can, because what got the Broncos was the speed of the Ravens, and the Chiefs don't have that same type of speed outside of Xavier Worthy at the wide receiver position.
Right. Yes. All righty. Well, that's going to take us, I think, down to the end of it. And before we call it a night there, any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Good weekend of college football. So if you guys have some time tomorrow, I know typically we're talking Sunday where the big boys play. But there's a pretty good slate of college football games on this weekend, so that should give you plenty to do in between household chores and honeydews and sporting events for the kids or whatever else people have going on tomorrow. So tune in, check out some of those. Who do your Sooners have tomorrow, Derek?
Oh, had you not asked me, I could have told you. I gotta look that up here real quick.
I mean, it looks like y'all found your offense last week a little bit, so you had to be pretty happy about that.
We played Maine.
It doesn't matter. You found your offense.
we played.
Just
We
take
played
it for
tonight.
what it's worth. You guys were able to have some rhythm offensively, which
It's true.
y'all have lacked here the last couple weeks, right? So
That's
that's a good
true.
thing.
Right? The wide receivers actually started looking, like they could rock and roll a little bit. But it's Missouri
Yeah.
next week, so kind of an
Oh,
old
Mizzou,
school
that's
Big
right.
8, Big 12 rivalry renewed there. So
Oh, that's good. That'll be fun.
yeah, so should be interesting, right? Like that's it's one of those two that finally I can see that game at not first thing in the morning. Last few weeks have been at that 10 a.m. So more of a night game there. So interested to be able to kind of watch that one there as sitting around the dinner table. So should be good. Should be good.
Yes, sir. But
So
yeah. So other than that, thanks for tuning in, y'all. A little bit of a quicker night, but that's okay. Sometimes the short ones are nice. Help recharge the batteries a little bit. But if anything pops up, if you're watching the playback tomorrow or before kickoff, whatever on Sunday, hit us up at Good Old Boys FF. Wherever you get your social media content, and please go over to YouTube, hit like and subscribe, and we appreciate that. We appreciate all the support you guys have, and um, you know, we thank you for allowing us to try and assist your fantasy football endeavors.
absolutely. Last couple of comments that came in here. I'm going to hit these up here and we're going to sign it off. But Mr. Wumbo saying his 32-year-old legs back to the Randy Moss side of things and saying good luck and thanks, guys. Joe had this one come in saying Joe just looked at Jake Moody is available. My other league has a cap on waiver moves. And since San Francisco already had a bye, is he a better kicker rest of the season over Siebert?
So Jake Moody was the number 2 or 3 overall kicker before he got injured.
Right.
Now they've had their bye week. He sat out. He healed up. So I don't see there's any reason that he wouldn't be. San Francisco is going to have to push to kind of get back in the division contention. They're a little bit behind here at the moment. So I think McCaffrey helps that as long as he's able to stay healthy. So I like the Jake Moody play. He's an accurate kicker. He's done well for them this year. He just got a little dinged up and had to sit out the last few weeks.
Yeah, I don't mind it either. So, and kickers, right? Like, you're talking about a guy coming back from injury versus a guy that's may miss due to injury this week. So, yeah, I would certainly kind of factor that in there, Joe. But I wouldn't mind the Jake Moody move either. So, all righty. Well, that's going to take us down to the end of it. And I do appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in, all the questions, comments, all of that. We'll keep everybody apprised of what the show early next week looks like, and whether that's what time that may be going, what day that may be going. So keep an eye out for that one, and we'll keep that going. Joe saying thanks, guys. Big help tonight. You are most welcome. And thank you again to everybody tuning in, watching, all of that good stuff. That's going to do it for us tonight. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.